that will require them, as he said, to wade through seas of blood to do that which we could have done with just a little wisdom.
You are listening to And If Love Remains, a unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Lovett.
You got that right, Rachel. This is your podcast in the sky, And If Love Remains. I am your host, Mike Lovett. I have with me today the Lion of Liberty, the Preacher of Liberty, the Sangman of Freedom. I'm just going to make up words, but that is Brother Joey Wolverton. Glad to have you back on, man.
Thank you, Mike.
And we have hey, it's fantastic. And we have another special guest. We have Joseph Porter.
Nope.
Oh, Corbett.
Close.
I knew there was an R in the word somewhere. Joseph Corbett, welcome. Good to have you, man.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Well, this is one of those things that you know, Joey, you and I have talked about a bit. Like, how do we present this super important information, the things that inspired our founding fathers? How do we present it in such a way that people will care? And I mean, I don't know the answer, but I definitely want to present it. And this is one of those really important letters. We're going to be talking about Cato's letter, specifically number 69. But you are the founder's recipe guy. You are the man that knows more about what the founders understood and what drove them than I think just about anybody, because you understand what they learned and what they knew. So talk about that and about these letters. Give us a little context here.
Yeah, so, but I came about it, it's not like I came preloaded.
Right.
This information. I came like everybody else does. I mean, each of us, in my belief, comes here with some purpose for coming here, that God isn't redundant, right? He provides for each person a particular mission. Now, whether or not you choose to accept and follow that. So my job on earth was to discover these things and then present these things to people whose job it would be to act out these things, right? And so when I was in college, I was the first person on either side of my family to go to college, and so it was very intimidating to me. I went to BYU, and so I would, sit there with 1,000 kids in my American Heritage class, right?
Yeah.
And so I was at the point of dropping out when one of my professors called me to his office, and he said that, I shouldn't drop out because he could tell that I was intelligent, but I was just ignorant, and which is true. And so what he put me on a path, to make the long story very short, he put me on a path that led to me discovering writers that had influenced our founding fathers that even he had never even heard of, or if he had heard of them, he only knew the slightest bit about what they wrote. And one of those things was Cato's letters by John Trenchard and Thomas Gordon. And of all the things that I read, and all of these 37 most often quoted people by the founding generation, all of them, I love what they write. But it came to me, as far as just me, my personality, and this is something where each individual will interact, will engage with the material in different ways, right? You will negotiate this material with your preconceived ideas of things. So the writings that appealed most to me, that I engaged with on a deeper level than all the rest, were Algernon Sidney and Cato's letters, Trenchard and Gordon. And these letters, just to really simply, written in the early 1720s, essentially letters to the editor of a newspaper in London. And they were originally written by John Trenchard. He had a secretary, a guy, so that has a different meaning today. He had a guy that would write down the things that he said.
Right.
And that guy was Thomas Gordon. And Thomas Gordon was some 34 years younger than John Trenchard. So these letters go through 1724. And they start in 1720. And I don't even know right now the number of them, 130-something letters. Most of them end up written by Thomas Gordon because John Trenchard dies. But the point of the letters, and there's one a week, right? They publish one each week. And the point of the letters was to identify for Englishmen the threats to their liberty from inside their own government.
Right.
They often say in their letters, there's no way we could be conquered by France or by Spain or by Holland, but we most certainly can be conquered by our own king, the king's cabinet, people inside our society hold the key to the continuance of our society. And so these letters are written, and at the top of each letter, you'll find a subject.
Right.
They say, this is what we're fixing to talk about, and they write about it. And every one of them is powerful. Every one of them, I have found an analog, a contemporary analog, something that affects us today that they wrote about. In fact, when I was doing TikTok, I used to do a thing, what did Trenchard and Gordon write 300 years ago today that's completely applicable to our own time?
Yeah.
Because they wrote in 1723, and so we're in 2023. So I would just pick the exact date, so March, or April 15th, and I would see what did they write on April 15th, 2023, and it never failed that it was applicable to us. And so these letters, if you could get, as with regard to Sidney, of course, Jefferson said, if you could get Sidney in the hands of every young man as soon as he's able to read, that would be critical to maintaining Republican government. And as far as Cato's letters were reprinted in every colonial newspaper, every one of them. They were reprinted in the colonial newspapers. They were called the dress rehearsal of revolution, because a story I tell is, for example, James Madison, his dad, who was also named James Madison, they weren't rich. They had a lot of land, but they couldn't put their hands on cash, right?
Right.
And so his dad would do business selling cotton and other tobacco and everything to England. And he would go and have dealings with Englishmen there at the docks in Virginia. And one of the things he would do, he couldn't afford, so after a while they bound Cato's letters together. But he couldn't afford to buy that. So what he would do is he would purchase one or two letters, copies of one or two at a time, bring them home, and his wife, Nellie, who was 19 when she had James, the man who became president, she would sew them together.
Oh, wow.
So that he could have a sort of homemade book of Cato's letters.
Wow.
And she would, and mind you, these letters were written when James Madison's mom and dad were being born.
Right.
So these are the things this is why I say things like, Joseph here, I used to get really frustrated that I preach all these things and do nothing about it. And it was my wife who said, well, yeah, James Madison Sr. didn't do anything about it either, except his wife taught these things. And then his tutor, when James became 11, became the student of Donald Robertson, except he made it possible for his son to learn these things.
Right.
So we don't take away from James Madison Sr. by saying he didn't do anything with all the knowledge he had. He did what he was called to do. And then by teaching these things to his son did what he was called to do.
Right.
And, no one has a painting of James Madison Sr. or Nellie Madison. No one does that. No one knows who they are. And I'm sure that wherever they are, they're fine with that.
Yeah.
Because they've received their reward for raising a child, and they had many children, but for raising a child who went on to accomplish that mission which he was assigned once upon a time. And so I don't feel as bad now. I don't feel as bad knowing that, someone like Joseph, who I taught these things to, well, that was my job. His job will be to, and maybe not, maybe it'll be the job of his children, I don't know. But my point is, you don't have to be like I did and take it personally and say, what a coward. Because if I really believed these things, I would do them. No, do the part of it that you're supposed to do.
Right. It's really, and it is, especially I believe in these days, like it's important to have, a scorned remnant, dare I say, that we have a remnant of people that pass on like the Jews did, for thousands of years. Like there has to be a remnant of people that pass these ideas down, so that when the time is right, when the time is ripe, which may be sooner than later, I don't know, but at some point there's going to be a group of people that have both the ability and the will to pull the walls down.
Well, they will or they won't.
Right.
They will have the ability. Whether they have the will is quite another thing, because that's another Cato, not Trenchard and Gordon Cato, but Cato the anti-federalist.
Yeah.
In his letter number 5, now not Trenchard and Gordon number 5, Cato number 5, Cato the anti-federalist, said that you can do this. We can hand down a free society to our children or not. And if we choose not to do those things that are required of us to bequeath to our children this patrimony of liberty, then that will require them, as he said, to wade through seas of blood to do that which we could have done with just a little wisdom. And so this is the thing that keeps me going, is I don't want the people that I've taught, they're getting to the age, many of my former students are having kids.
Right.
And I don't know if my former students or their children will be the generation called upon to do what our founding fathers did. But point is, regardless, I would prefer them not to have to wade through seas of blood to accomplish something that I could have helped do if I would have just done my part.
Right. I have a question for Joseph, if it's okay.
What's up, Mike?
So you went through his class,
yes.
And I'm just curious, like what, how did this impact you at the time, and does it impact you more, like the stuff that he taught you, and then we'll get into Cato 69. But yeah, like when you first heard this stuff, was it revolutionary to you? Had you heard it before? Give me your experience from firsthand from taking his class.
Okay, so I was raised always super patriotic, knowing the love of liberty and that it was important. But as soon as I met Wolverton and actually started down that journey of understanding the principles to why it's important, I didn't really take a step back and fully realize the scope. I was just kind of weaving my web. But now that I'm out in the real world and able to see just everything for what it is, now it's easier to apply those principles in my life, knowing that, not to get too religious, but knowing that my creator himself is behind me. It's easier,
Yeah. That's cool. That's wonderful. All right, well, let's talk about number 69. This is a killer letter. This is
one of those ones, along with, the one that came before it and the one that comes after it. They're like a holy trinity of calls to action with regard to liberty. I just think, 69 and 70 and 68, those three, man. If you're going to be one of those people that only read 3 Cato's letters, read 68, 69, and 70. Now, mind you, they're all worth your time. Because it's like I was telling someone the other day, because I was telling them we were going to talk about this, and they were like, oh, it's so long, because they're printed by Liberty Fund in 2 volumes. And they're like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'll get through all that. Well, okay, then there isn't a way. Because, speaking
Where there's not a will, there's not a way.
metaphysically, you get what you want.
Right.
You literally get what you want metaphysically. And so if you want to understand it, you'll read it and do what it takes, and that's how you'll know, right? It's that Marcus Aurelius who said, you can judge a man by the object he pursues. And that's true.
Yeah.
If you want to understand Cato's letters, you will. If you don't, you won't, and that's fine. But don't say, it's just too much. You don't know that. You never even opened it and started to read.
Right.
And, but yeah, 68, 69, 70.
And I'm sure we'll do podcasts on those as well. but this one, there's some real, there's so many quotables in this one.
There are. Yeah, this is definitely one that's chock full of pithy little quotations.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, we can kind of start with, okay, let's start.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very beginning, so after he, says, hey, and he tells the title to the freeholders, citizens, and burghers of the county, cities, and towns of Great Britain. If you read that next bit, you can see the Declaration of Independence. You can see this in the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Because this is the part where they're saying, political bodies are, people are that which inhabit government offices, and they occasionally have obstructions. Mm-hmm. And you can hear the whole, light and transient causes. You can see that Jefferson knew this stuff inside and out.
Yeah.
So they start out saying, you need to understand what government is, because today...
That's right.
Today we have an idea that government is this thing that exists and that somehow has eternally existed, or at least existed far back as we can remember.
So that civilization equals government.
Right, and that it has some sovereignty over us, and that it must be obeyed. It's just as if it exists independent of the people. And what they are going to do in this letter is say, if that is true, A, it's your fault, and B, you can undo that which you've done.
Right. Yeah. And I do appreciate, like, he goes into some detail about the, with most things, if they break down, we can pull them apart and put them back together, and we can fix them. And at some point, it becomes kind of unfixable, and so we have to start anew. It's one of the,
because he even used the phrase, right? He says, we can often look into its government's inmost frame and contexture, and when any of its constituent parts are decayed or worn out, we can supply it with new ones, right? But
right.
He then says, well, you can't do that with a physical body. We, of course, today can do that in many in many examples. We can do that, but he's like, you can supply it with new ones, and that's Jefferson. We have to select new guardians, right? He uses that phrase. We select new guardians of our liberty. And so he's saying, if you find that some part of the Constitution is not working, some part of the government's not working, you can get new parts, just like you could for any machine.
Right.
And that's, and this is the thing that I try to do all the time, is get people to bring down their understanding of government to a more basic understanding, a more worldly, a more common connection, an analog in your everyday life. Like, if you had a car and something was, if you had a flat tire, you're not going to continue just to drive on that flat tire because that's the flat tire. That's the tire it came with.
Right.
I'm not going to change this tire. This tire is the tire it came with, and we should revere this tire. This tire is the best tire.
In fact, how dare you, not salute? Let's salute the tire.
Right? It makes and not a sane person would say, "Oh, I think you should." No, you're gonna put a new tire on, and so that's all they're saying here is think of your government not as a person or even as a group of people or some organism that exists independent of you, but think of it as a machine.
Right.
A machine that is supposed to serve your purpose like a car. And if part of that machine, as he says, if part of it decays or wears out, you replace it.
Right.
And not only do you think, oh, dang, I have to replace it, you're like, I want to replace it because this machine was built to serve me.
Yeah.
That is the truth of government as well.
And when it, and I love this word, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but I had to look it up. But kashexi, kakexi.
Where are you looking at?
It's third paragraph. Let's see, where does it say? But when a state is in a kashexi.
Where are you looking?
Where am I?
Oh, so it's in the middle of a paragraph.
Yeah, it's in the middle of a paragraph. See?
Oh, Chelsea, yeah.
Right. That, what is our duty when it becomes when it becomes in the state of general reduction of vitality, strength, body resulting from a deliberative, when the government has become so deliberating.
The end of that is important. You trailed off, but read the end of that definition.
Or chronic disease. Let's see. So the definition of kashexi, any general reduction in vitality and strength of body and mind resulting from a debilitating chronic disease.
Right, chronic.
Right. Ongoing. Right. So
I think it's important though, because if you're going to claim that these men, yes, you can find where they, if you go to Founders Archive and you put in Cato or Trenchard and Gordon, they reference this all. Well, you had to, if James Madison at age 11 had gone to his tutor and not known this stuff, it would have been a bit embarrassing. And so, to his parents, So, yeah, it's chronic. It's a long trick. So pointing out where you can see these things sort of percolate up into, the documents of our founding, it's important to point that out.
I appreciate that, yeah.
When the state, because you could read this and read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence to say, okay, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, you could. You should. Because you're right. It's right here, and it's saying that it's our duty. Like it's not just like if you want to. It's not just like, if I feel like it, but it then becomes the duty of the freeman to pull away, to.
But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, it evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That's exactly what he just said.
That's right. That is what he said. And again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that this comes to a fundamental definition of government. Like, is government something that creates a space for us to live in, or is government a thing that we create to help serve us do certain specific things that will help us be more free, to protect our rights?
Again, the Declaration of Independence, government exists for one reason and for one reason only: to secure those rights given to us by our Creator. That's it. That's the only reason it exists.
Right.
Right? And any other thing is not government, but something else. Right? Cicero says that. It might be something, but it's not government and it's not law.
Yeah.
It's something else. It's tyranny and despotism or whatever. But if a government, because you got to remember the word govern comes from the Greek word meaning to steer a ship. Right? So you can imagine if we're on a ship and we decide we want to go to Cabo, San Lucas.
Yeah.
And we hire a captain who has, submitted a resume. I don't know how we hire kids. Down on the docks looking at captains for sale. We find a captain who says, yeah, I can do the job. We start sailing, we find out this dude's not going the right way. Like, any of us can see it's not. And so, because we can see the sun, we're like, hey, Cabo is south of here,
We're
west of here, and you're going north. What are you doing? Now, he could say to us, right? He is the governor, literally in Greek, he's the governor of that ship. And don't forget, they call society the ship of state. He's the governor of that ship. Now, we could come to him and say, hey, Captain, hey, Captain, you're heading north, we're supposed to be heading south. He's like, I know that, but I'm more experienced than you. I know what you want, and I'm gonna get you a better place up north. Well, I don't care.
right. That's not what we hired you to
More
do.
experienced than me. You could even be right that the place you want to take me is better than the place I want to go, but I don't care.
Right.
You are hired for one reason: take us to Cabo. If you prove, I don't care if it's 100 meters or 100 miles in that journey, you prove that you are now, because of this honor that we, the passengers, have placed upon you. If you decide, I'm going somewhere else because I know better or whatever, or because a few of the passengers have paid me to take them somewhere else secretly, whatever the motivation, if you decide, that very moment, the passengers, those of us who really want to go to Cabo and who aren't involved in any sort of conspiracy to take us other places, we can take that captain, obviously, because we are the one who hired him, and we can relieve him of his duties and choose from among ourselves a captain, or we can pull into the dock, get on another ship, find another captain. None of this would any sane person question.
Right.
But when you change from the analogy of a ship and a captain to government and political servants, people lose their minds.
Yep.
No, we can't do that. And it's simply, the analogy is exact.
It is exact, and it's not just in the people or the offices, but it's even in the actions that government takes. If you were to describe taxation in any other way and not use the word taxation, any sane person would call that theft. Whether it's from one person to another person, from a gang of people to another, from another person. If the gang of people call themselves the police and take from another person, if the gang of people are authorized by a person that's hired by your neighbors to take property from another person, that's all theft. It's only once you say it's not taxation that people go, what? How will the roads be built?
That's another thing. If you read in Cato's letters, if you read any of these people, even if you were to read the documents written by the founding fathers, this is what, so many things annoy me, but one of the things that annoy me is that anybody could read that. Anybody could read that taxation has been, from the beginning of Anglo-American history, taxation has been associated, and only associated, with the money necessary to prepare to defend the realm against a clear and present danger. It is not something, A, to make revenue. That's never been.
Right.
It is not something, B, to accumulate funds to dole out to others. Charity has no part of the legislative business, said James Knox. It is simply it has always been tied to that one reason only, to prepare a defense of the realm. Right. And all throughout English history, and no one knows this because I think, it'd be brilliant if we could just take all these books, give them new covers, and say that J.K. Rowling wrote it. I think we could get people to read this.
It might be.
They're just going to think and just change some names to like whatever names are. Just go there and people like, oh my gosh, did you read? But
The letters of Harry Potter.
you could read that anytime a king has attempted to tax his people and have it not be because of an obvious, a clear and present threat to the safety of the kingdom,
Right.
the people rejected. I mean, you've got names people don't know today, but like John Wilkes, right? You've got John Selden. These people that said, I'm not paying tax so that you can have another mistress.
Right.
And they just make it up. So today, people are like, well, taxation isn't theft. Boy, it is actually. And it's beyond theft, it's extortion.
You're right.
Because if you don't pay that tax, you very well could end up in prison.
That's right.
Right?
So as April 15th is looming,
Well, it is today. But the Crown has said we have till April 18th.
That's true. Well, thank the Crown for that. And here's the other thing I love about this letter. As I was reading through it, Trenchard really does put the onus on us. He says the first springs that bring to life all virtuous resolutions comes from the free people.
Tell me where you're reading that.
Oh man, where is this at?
Where does the paragraph begin? Don't jump me into the middle.
I'm sorry. Let's see. This has got to be.
Don't give me a number. Just tell me what words start the very beginning of the paragraph.
Well, because I'm taking it from my notes.
Oh, blimey! I thought you were looking at the thing. Okay. Well, just go ahead and say it then.
Oh, here it is. It's gonna be paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. It lies upon you, gentlemen, to give motion to the machine.
Okay, yep.
You are the first springs that give life to all virtuous resolutions, and it's up to you. And through the whole, the one of the major themes is the fact that you've got that it is your fault if tyranny exists.
Yeah, I mean it is.
Yeah,
That's the thing. It's
like we're not passive passengers on this thing. We did it to ourselves.
Well, we may be passengers on the ship, but we hire the captain.
Right.
Right. And so you give. How does a ship? Well, a ship needs a captain. We give motion to the machine. A car. If we're driving on a flat tire, that car's not going to drive itself.
Right.
We give motion to the car. We drive on a flat tire and do damage to the car.
Yeah.
And because you yourself know, and I mean, anybody who's listening to this knows that is a flat tire in the scheme of things that can be wrong with your car very bad? No. But if you continue to drive on a flat tire, could that do irreparable harm to your car?
Yes.
And so, could it do it if you drive it a block to get? No. But if you drive it day after day, decade after decade on that flat tire, you are going to do irreparable harm to that car to the point where it no longer is a car.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It becomes
something else. A doorstop. A prison. Yeah.
Right? It becomes lots of things, but it's no longer a car. And so he says, you're the ones. If a good thing happens in your government, then you will do it, because he says it so clearly, such as you show yourselves, such will be your representatives.
Right.
You get the government that you deserve.
And yeah, and it starts with you. Like, and the way I read that, it's not even about like what you like. If you're a virtuous person, you're going to choose a virtuous representative. If you're not a virtuous person, it's like by your fruits you shall know them. Mm-hmm. So if we look around and we see that there's zero virtue in government, there's zero virtue in Washington D.C., there's zero virtue in our state capital, and we look around, we go, wait a sec, does that mean there's no virtue in me?
Well, that's the thing. That's something that Algernon Sidney said. He's like, look around at your society, see how many organizations exist that are dedicated to things that are not virtuous, the pursuit of non-virtuous things. Can you picture 20 years ago there being a such thing as let's see, what year are we at? I'm going to make sure I'm right. Okay, I'll say it this way. When I was 17, if I wanted to see pornography, which I did not, but if I wanted to, I would have had to go somewhere where they sell it.
Right.
I would have had to somehow sneak to the part of the bookstore where they had it. I'd have to unwrap it from the paper that it was in. And I would have to look. Today, a kid that's 17 can get that on his phone.
Right.
For free. I would have had to buy the magazine or a movie, go to a movie.
Right. There would even, and at 17, you would have to have stolen it.
They wouldn't have sold.
They wouldn't. There's actually a barrier. There's somebody there that says you can't have that.
Right. And so you think about that. It's irrefutable that the most prosperous segment on the internet is pornography. Mm-hmm. I was just listening this morning to a podcast, and they were talking about how the OnlyFans is now making millions upon millions of dollars. And so you could sort of take that as a yardstick. We're not a virtuous people, because a virtuous people would not only not allow, it wouldn't occur to us to create avenues for mothers to behave pornographically for purchase by people.
Right.
It wouldn't occur. And so, yes, representatives become a reflection of who we are. And we can't deny that. And so that's why I always say that, step one in restoring liberty is restore your personal virtue. A virtuous man can make a virtuous family can make a virtuous neighborhood, etc.
Right.
But it begins with us. It lies upon you to give motion to the machine, either to propel that machine farther down the road of, authoritarianism, or to pull back on the reins and give motion to the machine along a trajectory that leads toward liberty. It's 100% up to. Now, what that requires of us depends on, again, going back to the beginning, what you're called to do.
Right.
What that requires of you.
But either way, I'll just say it straight this way. I'll just say it, no matter what, it requires a certain degree of repentance, turning back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It requires, because are you, he says, such as is the tree, such will be the fruit. Are you a person who's able to bring forth virtuous fruit? You don't want there to be virtuous resolutions if you're a person who lives a life of vice. You don't want that, because the contrast will make you feel worse than you already do.
Yeah.
Why do people quit going to church? There may be a million reasons, but I know one of the reasons is you don't want to sit there and be reminded of your sin if you know you're currently involved in that thing, and you're going to hear people the whole time you're at church talking about how God doesn't like that thing. You don't want to sit there and hear that, not because it's not true, but because of the contrast and the pain that contrast elicits in you.
Right.
And so the same is true for government. I don't want virtuous people in charge, because they're liable to actually follow the Constitution. And as it is right now, I prefer it not be followed, because I will lose my subsidies, and I will lose my, government subsidized mortgage, and I will lose my unemployment, and I will lose my welfare, and I will lose my whatever million different things. I'll lose my forgiveness for my student loan, whatever.
It is interesting. The love of money is the root of all evil. What does he say at the end of this thing? How many people will sell out their principles for a little pocket change? They'll they'll allow the tyranny to exist because it's great men will use the power of government to enrich themselves, and then but in that turns, and then what do great men, I'm using scare quotes here, what do great men do when they enrich themselves? Well, they gain power, and they gain power by gifting out their wealth to their friends.
Right, and the tyranny is easy. Some people say,
Yeah.
tyrants make our life so difficult. No, they don't. That's like saying the devil makes your life difficult. He doesn't.
No,
He does not do that at all. He makes your life so dang easy.
right. You're okay just the way you are.
Dude. And if you want to do worse things.
Yeah.
I saw a lady the other day, and she'd been, I guess, outed, I don't know what you'd say, as being this, she was a professor, but she was also a porn star. And she was out, and she makes this statement, rather than saying, oh, I'm sorry, she's like, if God exists, when I see him, I'm simply going to say to him, hey, you're the one who put me here. You gave me all these opportunities to experience humanity, and I did it. Right? The devil wants you to have a good time. And so tyrants don't want to make your life difficult. They want to make your life easy.
Right, they do.
And so liberty, freedom is a difficult thing not only to achieve, but to protect.
Freedom is scary.
Yeah, it is scary. It's very dangerous. And so, but again, going back to what they say, you will sell your freedom for a mess of pottage. Mm-hmm. Particularly if you're hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so that's why it's important for men of sound mind, people who are freedom thinkers, to choose honest men, free and independent men. Those will act honestly for the public interest, which would be your interest.
Right. The public interest is, and Blackstone says that, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as the public good.
Right.
The public good is your good, your neighbor's good, all y'all together, it's the public good, but that is no different than your good.
Yep.
Right? And so, yes, but think of this is the thing, Mike, people read that and it goes down a track in their mind where it says, choose good men for, that's not what he said. That is part of what he said. But there's this, there's that pathway carved into your mind that when someone says these things, no one pumps the brakes and marinates in this a little bit. It's like people just want to get to the end of the story. Well, enjoy the story for the prose.
Yeah.
If you're reading Hemingway, don't just get to the end of the story, man. Just marinate in the good writing. And so when you see here, when Trenchard is saying this, don't just get to the, okay, yeah, we got to elect good people. That's not the point. There's so many other points. Mm-hmm. But even in this sentence where he says, if you break these down, okay, so if you want to be free, if you want to perpetuate your free society it's a government where the people rule through elected representatives, then this is the type of man that you have to elect. Honest. An honest man? I don't know the last honest man that was president. Maybe James Monroe.
Right.
Free. Maybe.
Well, and let's talk about what does that mean? Like free of all encumbrances, like free of any external, what would we call them? Lobbyists and, what does that mean?
free of those entangling alliances.
Right.
Lobbyists, free of foreign intrigue.
Uh-huh. Right. When we say free, we don't just mean like he was a free man. Like there's a lot more to that one word.
From those fetters that bind other men down.
Yeah.
And then he says independent. There's no one could get elected today to federal office who doesn't go down a path of Democrat or Republican.
That's right.
You may eventually declare yourself independent. You didn't win your election as an independent. Mm-hmm. You won it based on your ability to be servile to one of the two private corporations that we have allowed to control the elections. So, an independent man.
There's none.
Look,
Yeah.
you know, and because if you find this type of man, he says they will act honestly for the public interest, which is your interest.
You know, this reminds me of in the Psalms, David. It's the last words of David, and he says, you know, he that ruleth over men must be just. And you know, as you read that, and knowing who David is, and knowing his shortcomings, and knowing all the problems that Israel had with all of their kings, and then applying that to today, I think one has to come to the realization that no one is just. There's no one. Well, there's one who is just enough to rule, and you know, like I don't see anybody electing him anytime soon.
No, I mean, you can find those who are making a good go at it, who, despite their mortality and their, you know, their shortcomings, as you said, that they're making a good go at it, you know. And so I don't. Yes, ultimately, as a Christian and as an anarchist, I would say no king but Christ.
Right.
Obviously. But I'm also someone who is a little more political realist in the short term and say, okay, well, at least in the short term, you can find those men who are as honest as
Fair enough. Yeah.
free as any of us could be, as independent as any of us could be. But this next sentence, it is not expected that criminals will destroy their own handiwork.
Right.
And this yesterday, or no, day before, let's see, what is today, Saturday? Wednesday I did a show with another podcast, and I was like, and this person wanted to argue with me about the notion that the Republicans and Democrats, there's not a dime's worth of difference between them. And I said, you know, my wife is doing taxes right now, and Obamacare is still the law.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. Criminals will not undo the handiwork of the other members of their criminal gang.
That's right. That's right.
How many of, you know, you look just yesterday, Biden was saying that he's not going to change some Trump policies. Of course you're not.
Of course you're not.
Because y'all are on the same team.
Uh-huh. That's right. It's about what we're going to decide what the public is going to argue about, and it's going to be within this little Wolverton window. And if you try to argue outside that window and actually say, no, we should have, you know, maybe we should rethink this whole Ukraine thing. Maybe we should rethink this whole, you know, Obamacare thing. Like, oh, now you're outside the bounds. Maybe we should rethink, you know, name your pet government project. Maybe we should
Alphabet agencies.
Right. It should be abolished. But the second you start saying that, it's like outside that Wolverton window, and you're like, no, we're I can think of one person in politics in the last 50 years that would even think about doing that, and he had little power to do it, but Ron Paul was the one guy who would be like...
I think today in Congress, Thomas Massey would do it if he had the power to do it. I think he would abolish the alphabet agency.
And Rand would probably be alongside.
If there was movement toward,
Yeah.
I think they would go along. It's just there needs to be a popular swell of people, and that's again.
And that goes
back to
Yep.
what? Go ahead.
No. That goes right back to this very letter that says, if it is to be, it's up to me. Like, it's your fault. Like, why isn't there a popular upswell? It's because there's...
Yeah, and what I was going to say is goes back to, okay, it's not my job to be a Madison, it's my job to be James Madison's teacher.
Yeah.
And so it's like, don't lose faith because it's not being done, because maybe James Madison hasn't been born yet or whatever, or maybe he hasn't, you know, there's other things that need to be accomplished. But you notice, it's the funny thing about this is that, you know, these men will not reform themselves, punish themselves. They will not change. So he's like, men who have brought our misfortunes upon us, they will never go about in earnest to redress them or even admit that there are such things.
Right.
Admit that the war on drugs is a failure and foolish and feckless and unconstitutional.
And killed way more people than...
Just admit that. Don't even say, and I'm going to end it. Don't do that. Don't make a fool of yourself, because you know you won't. But admit it. They won't.
They won't.
Admit that the war on poverty has created the drug problem. Admit that.
Yep.
You won't.
And I love the imagery that he says right after that, where he says, besides, deep wounds must be probed and searched to the core before they can be cured. And those who gave them can seldom bear to see the operation, much less will they pay for the cure if they can be at ease by the death of the patient. So if they can kill us, they'd rather kill us than have their evil deeds born open to the world.
Yeah, and when you take death and maybe apply it metaphorically,
Yeah.
the death of wisdom, the death of virtue, they're not going to do anything. It's like I always say, why aren't these things taught in school? It should already be obvious. Right? They're not going to pay people to destroy this century-long monopoly they have over education. Right? When, as a teacher, I was told that, because the last year that I was teaching in a, brick and mortar school is the year they started accepting federal matching funds. And so I was told, here's the curriculum that we have to follow now in order to qualify for these funds. And one of the things that relate to this is, because my first year, I bought for every student a copy of the Iliad, because I think there are few books as inspiring and as foresightful as the Iliad. Plus, the poetry is powerful. But it's like, you can no longer teach the Iliad. You can no longer teach Greek and Roman history. You just teach the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. And if you want to teach that other stuff, make a handout and just give it to the kids. Don't take up classroom time.
Wow.
Right, because teaching of the gods and goddesses is going to do very little to inspire someone to throw off chains of tyranny, or to even identify that such chains exist.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've been told for 100 years now that Lincoln freed the slaves, when in reality, all that happened is the plantation has gotten larger.
Yeah.
But if you can teach that to now 6 generations, right, they are at ease. They're not going to ever bear to see the operation or pay for the cure.
That's right.
Because they benefit by your death. They don't, you can even apply it to the whole COVID.
Yeah, absolutely you can.
They're not, they don't want you healed. They want you on the drug that they've invented to do whatever nefarious purpose it was designed, because you're not allowed to know.
Right. But one thing we do know is that a lot of people made a lot of money. That's one thing we can point to.
These people, this mafia that runs I hate to call it government, but I'll use that word to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. The mafia that controls the government, they have no incentive, nor will they ever have any incentive to, as he says, they won't reform themselves, never. They won't punish themselves, ever. They won't even admit that the bad thing is bad. They won't do any of that.
Yeah.
They will not in any way contribute to the curing, even the treatment of the societal ills that have brought us to the place we are now. Right?
Because it gives them power.
Right. And he says, let us therefore, my countrymen, let us not, my countrymen, desert or deceive ourselves, or think we can be safe if ever such men get into power.
Yeah. Well, and here's one thing that I've noticed is they may call them bureaucracies or agencies or the judiciary. Like they create these layers on top of this monster, and then they're all bribed. Like I would make the case today, and you can call it hyperbole and that'd be fine, but I would make the case that every single judge in America is a bribed judge because he's bought by the state, so of course he's going to rule in favor of the state, other than a token once or twice in order to keep the people at bay. But for the most part, they're agents of the state, and they're bribed every single day and by the state, because that's how they make their living and that's how they gain their power.
Right, and it wouldn't even be like a token correct. They just might be mistaken.
Right.
And it might be a mistake in our favor.
Well, yeah, and
that's the thing.
That's right. It might be.
I'm serious.
By the way, I say that about the police. I say, trust me, the police are there to protect the state, not you. You just might be getting in the way of that protection.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, that's another podcast.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, the judge.
Yeah. This is the thing that I always say. If it weren't a mafia, if it weren't a literal conspiracy, there'd be more if it were just people making mistakes, once in a while, one of those mistakes would be in our favor. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Once in a while, there'd be some major policy change that would propel us back toward liberty, individual liberty. There never is.
Never is.
And so this tells me there is a conspiracy. Once in a while, they don't control things like they would, but there's never a big decision. If it were just human beings thinking things through and being incorrect, sometimes that those errors would be in our favor. But
right.
It's not.
Right. And you wouldn't have things like, and I'm thinking specifically of judges and courtrooms right now, but you wouldn't have specific things like judges saying that jury nullification doesn't exist when it in fact does. Like
when it in fact, the jury system was created as to nullify. The jury of your peers, this is what people peers, no one thinks about what that means. The jury of your peers is supposed to be 12 people that know you and that are predisposed to think you are innocent. You have to really prove it, man. That's what the jury is supposed to. The jury is supposed to be prepared and even motivated to nullify the law. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of the jury. The purpose of the jury today, what's the jury? You have to find the 12 most ignorant people. I mean, the system is set up. As a lawyer, I used to get to say that. You have so many skips that you get just gone, removed. And then you can ask them questions. Do you know what bribery is? If they say yes, gone. But the jury system was intended to nullify the law.
Yeah.
It was created. It wasn't created to serve the purposes of the prosecutor. It was created to serve the purposes of the defense.
Yeah.
You say yes, but nobody knows that.
No, wait, but and
even people who think they're constitutional or conservative don't know that, and
that's right.
Against that.
That's right. They would, and it's really when you see things like conviction rates that would make Mal blush. Like we have to just think to ourselves, oh, are there really that many criminals in America? Are there really that many it just doesn't make like I'm a musician. so like I think strangely. I get that. But like, if you're a scientifically minded guy and you're into like studies and stuff like that, wouldn't you look at like the conviction rate in America and go, that just looks fixed?
Well, you can. I mean, there's a book called The Moral Sense by a guy named James Wilson. And read that book where he did that. He's like, I'm going to take, and he's a political scientist, and he's like, I'm going to take the data and see what the data reveal to me. Right? So, but getting back to this is one of my favorite things and something we just don't do. Let us judge what men will do by what they have done. Don't listen to their warm and plausible remonstrances. Don't listen to what
their campaign speeches. Yeah.
Judge what they will do by what they have done. Right?
Yep. That's, I mean, again, and part of the problem is because so many in public office have literally, in many cases, grown up in public office. All we have ever seen them done is public office. And so when everything that they've done has been under the guise of government, like who's been an entrepreneur and then went and went to public office, and many times, even if they were an entrepreneur, like they were an entrepreneur in the same sense that like Elon Musk is, where they got a bunch of government contracts. In other words, they're in government because they realize that's where the power and that's where the money lies.
Right, and even if you have, Bastiat talks about this, where he says, occasionally you might have an honest, free and independent man who gets elected.
Yeah.
What so often happens is once that person's elevated to office, they look down and now say, well, because I've been given this honor, that must mean I'm better than these people.
Oh, yeah.
Somehow they see that I'm better than them, and they want me to rule over them.
And unfortunately, the people comply to that. A lot of people say, well, hey, how are we gonna let's go complain to the school board, let's go complain to our legislature, which is fine, go complain, but like at some point you gotta pull your kid out, you've got to leave, you've got to do something a little more drastic than complain.
Yeah, but there are people, and Churchill and Gordon they have a whole letter about how first of all, they mentioned the parties are standing, the political parties are inside the castle, and they'll get up and make speeches from the ramparts of the castle, firing up one or the other groups of people against the other group of people, while inside they're all laughing and dividing up our spoils.
Yeah, exactly right.
But they're standing inside that, like, hey, let's go rile up the races. And they'll stand up there and do that, and then they'll retire back inside the castle, and they'll have the next, you go and say this, okay. And you don't realize they're the same group of people.
They're on the same team, right, Joe?
Right, but we don't, that's the thing. Someday we're going to realize that it's not Republicans versus Democrats or blacks versus whites, it's us against them.
That's right.
Someday we're going to realize, and when they do, that's that thing that Raynal wrote, that fateful rousing. Beware, he says to the tyrants, of that day when they recognize that you exist to serve them, you're not serving them, and they outnumber you.
Yeah.
That fateful rousing.
I'm curious, Joseph, do you mind if I ask you something else? I'm like, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm enjoying listening.
But I'm curious, because you're a little bit younger guy than us, like when, with your friends and the people that you know, and it's one sample size, like I get that, but like, what do you think this kind of stuff wouldn't resonate with them? Do you think that they're too busy, trying to build a career or whatever? Like, what are your thoughts on how your generation would take the stuff that Brother Joey and I are chatting about?
Okay, so a good portion of them, a great portion portion of them would not care. No. But it's not necessarily their own fault because they've been born into a society that conditions them to think as such. A society that doesn't necessarily value a free thinker or someone who pursues truth. And so it's not their fault. You can't choose the conditions you're born into, but you can choose your path out, or your path to a higher power, toward your creator, and doing your will toward him and not necessarily toward man. So a good portion of them wouldn't, but I do know some really good people who value this information and who take it to heart and who know that this life is only a short time in the grand scope of things. And so take that as you will, but
yeah.
So
no, that's good. That's good insight, man. That's interesting. Because I have kids, and I know that this stuff resonates with them. I mean, they use it against me all the time. But at the same time, like they're truly like they're independent. They're their own people, and they do their own thing. And so, but my wife and I try to create a culture that that cultivated that, bringing, Joey in to teach my kids was a big part of that. But I do get that. Like, I am the outsider. Like did things differently than what most people did. So that's interesting insight. And
I think there are a lot more people out there like that. It's just that the small majority of our society has the loudest voice. And so I think there are a lot of closet people who think a lot like you and who are cultivating that environment for their children. It's just that they're not necessarily loud about it because it's not a popular way to think, per se.
Yeah, and that goes to the whole thing that, I've talked about a lot with the whole Sydney thing about this. Throughout history, the group that rises up and ultimately throws off tyrants are those kids who were raised hid and unregarded. Mm-hmm. Right, whose family settled such a discipline, right? Not, these are, and there are few of them. I mean, he names like 6, right? Brutus, Coriolanus.
Yeah.
He names about 6 of these kids who, when they became of age, they bore testimony of liberty greater than any before, and that will continue to be talked about throughout the ages. But they were raised, he says, hid and unregarded. And I think that's a good thing. Because so many people are like, I wish so-and-so would take a more active role in politics. And I'm like, well, maybe that person is called to do that. I don't know. But it's like the other day, a friend of mine, she used to be a student and she's having children. And she was like, I feel embarrassed that I haven't continued since school to take on this active participation in pushing back against things. And I'm like,
wow, yeah.
Spend your time raising patriots.
Yeah.
Don't worry about teaching anybody else. Don't worry about anyone even knowing what you believe. Just make sure your children know that from the cradle they are raised with these things the way, the whole Nellie Madison sewing together potatoes.
Yeah.
That kind of devotion to the cause, is literally mathematically more effective. One person being a patriot is great, but that person, if she's a woman, creating 5, 6, 7 patriots is better for us in the long run.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, saying that it's a silent majority or whatever, the truth is, if you took the percentage of people that we call founding fathers, and even if you expand that definition to include, the way I expanded it is to say, anybody who signed the Declaration of Independence, anybody who served in either one of the Continental Congresses, anyone who went to the Constitutional Convention, anyone who served in any of the ratifying conventions. If you take all of those people and you take the percentage...
And humor, sir. Sorry.
The percentage of those people and you apply it to the population of America. Mm-hmm. the people that it would require to accomplish what our founders accomplished in a ratio that they were to the overall population, we would only need the amount of people, I'm talking about all over the country, not just Arizona, but all 50 states. If you could gather all of those people together, they would fit inside Chase Field.
Wow. Wow.
So I think, what Joe's saying is right. It's like there are more of them. There are more people than we would expect that believe in these things, and we don't need that many. Right? Even those people that are like, oh, the 3%ers, it's so much less than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much less than 3%. We just have to have people willing to do what they are able to do. Don't run faster than you have strength.
Right.
It's like Plato, who in the Republic, who talks about gold, silver, and bronze people. He's like, the Republic becomes disordered, ceases to function, and in fact becomes tyrannical when you have bronze people doing gold jobs and gold people doing bronze jobs. Gold is not more important to the Republic than bronze. Right?
Right.
So being a bronze person, you having this, because I would say in the effort to restore liberty, I'm a bronze person, in that my role is less than the role of someone who is going to physically take up arms.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm cool with that. But we get a disordered republic when you have gold people doing silver jobs, silver people doing gold jobs, etc. Find what it is that you do, and that you do better than other people.
Yeah.
Admit that you do it better than other people, and then do that thing consistently.
Amen. And I also, just to add to that, I think all three of us believe, and many others believe, that God is a God of liberty. Like, he wants us to be free. He wants us to have liberty. He wants us to put down tyrants. He wants us to put only him first. That's the first commandment. So if we can learn how to listen to and follow the Spirit, follow God, and do what he wants, do that one thing really well, and that what makes you, and when I say makes you feel really good, I don't mean that in like a carnal sense. I mean the thing that like truly brings you joy. If you can do that over and over and be the best at it, then, and that is God telling you to do that thing, and that will bring liberty to more people than you trying to storm January 6th style the White House. Because trust me, that didn't.
Pretending that was an actual insurrection.
Right. It wasn't, but that's a whole other podcast.
But you look at the list of things that he lists that the government is doing, that he's like, surely this list now convinces you that what I'm saying is true. Look at the thing he said.
Yeah.
Exorbitant pensions. I mean, do you realize that if you serve 4 years in Congress, you get 75% of your salary for the rest of your life?
It's insane.
That's, same true for the president. You get Secret Service. You get a car. They pay for you to have an office in the city you want to have.
I think my favorite was when they talked about if President Trump goes to jail, that he'll have a Secret Service with him in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
But so you have exorbitant pensions, outrageous taxes, wild and expensive expeditions. There's no reason that the President of the United States has to have, like we saw the other day, we pointed out, 24 cars, a motorcade when he goes to visit Ireland.
Yeah.
Why?
That's what kings do.
Why? That is what kings do. Yeah, I remember when Obama went and visited Spain, and they rented out 2 floors of this hotel. Now, that wasn't because he had his retinue that took up those 2 floors. It was just so that no one could get near the king.
Right. Right. It does remind me a little bit of like the miniseries, the John Adams miniseries. When Adams is vice president, he's trying to get people to call George Washington, Your Highness, and all this stuff. And it makes me laugh because it's like we all want like our presidents to be on par with all these kings, and it's like, no,
he's the leader of the free world.
That's right. King by
boss. You're the boss, sir.
And don't you forget it.
Exorbitant pensions, outrageous taxes, wild and expensive expeditions, increasing the public debt.
Huh. We don't have that there.
Standing troops quartered up and down your country. Oppressive companies to the destruction of your trade and industry. Private men raising immense estate upon your ruin. Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, all these people with the Ford. I just read an article for the New American because in Tennessee, right outside the town where I live, they have this thing they call Blue Oval City. Blue Oval City, it's because Ford is going to start building these electric trucks and the batteries there outside Lakeland in rural West Tennessee.
Yeah.
And the incentive package was in the billions. We're giving you this incentive to come here. So when he says against oppressive companies to the destruction of your trade and industry, imagine the entrepreneurship available, possible, if there were no government.
Oh, man.
If there was no corporate welfare.
Yeah.
If there were no subsidy, if you just had to rely on your own good sense, your own motivation, your own ability to get things done, and you weren't up against an Amazon that gets billions,
right?
A Tesla that gets billions, a Ford that gets billions. If you just had to compete, and all the funds out there were equally available to all, based on
merit and
your desire, your drive. Imagine how that would be. Against bribing and corrupting the guardians of public liberty.
Yeah. And yeah, that's.
I mean, you saw that.
Every state official right there.
Right. State official, they all get Potomac fever. They all go and be federal officials.
Yep.
And then you have, even like Clarence Thomas, a guy who I actually respected. He's on the take.
Yep.
It's like,
broke my heart. It's like, come on, man. Even A2 Clarence.
I mean, not that it did surprise. I was about to say it didn't surprise me. It did surprise me.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I'm like, don't put your trust in the arm of flesh. But it did surprise me. But here, the things he's listing, again, take this to the Declaration. I'm not saying this theoretically. I'm saying this literally.
Right.
Take this list, compare it to the list in the Declaration of Independence.
It's right there. It's all it's there. These are the things the King is doing to us, and why we feel it necessary and our duty to throw him off and to say we are free and independent of your reignship.
And he says in the Declaration, some people are going to suffer evil. They're just going to sit back and say, oh, well, we used to be free. That you can do that.
Or they're going to say, we're still free compared to the rest of the world. Which I don't know how true that is, but okay.
No matter how true it is.
Right, it doesn't. Right, it's still not free.
Free, I am.
Yeah.
Do I want you to be free? I do. But my first concern is my freedom. Now, if I get to a certain level of prosperity that my freedom can help you be freer, I feel a Christian compulsion to do that. But I don't feel a Christian compulsion to do that if I'm enriching you by impoverishing myself.
That's right.
That doesn't make any sense. And so you look at these things, every one of these things, and then the thing I said the other day, I'd take 3 weeks to teach the Declaration of Independence, if you can believe that. It takes 3 weeks to teach that document. And one of the things I say is, take this list and ask, do we?
Right.
We experience.
That's the next step, right? Like
because this was written 54 years before
the
Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson wasn't even born. Thomas Jefferson's dad was born. Right?
Yeah.
But just to give you an idea, people don't think about that. To give you an idea of the timeline. This is the dress rehearsal for Revolution. Yeah, because it put into their minds things that they wouldn't use until,
Okay, so, these are letters to the editor of a newspaper. What was happening in England at that time that...
Well, Mike, if you'd read Cato's letters, you would know that at the very beginning, they introduce what is wrong. At this time, they had, I'm saying that, I'm joking with you, obviously, but halfway joking.
Not joking at all.
I'm joking since I'm calling you out on it like that.
Yeah.
But
I just want the audience to know why.
yeah, I know. You're right. I know.
I know.
But no, if that is true, that is true. You probably did do that, and I'm not. Now I'm the one who's like, it's fun enough to catch that. Something that's so appropriate and so applicable to our day is it starts out because the government had entered into an agreement with a private company to take control of the monetary system of the yeah.
That's awesome.
They had a group called the South Sea Company.
Yeah.
That the government of England gave control of the South Sea Company over the monetary policy of England. And so they were motivated because this South Sea Company, all of a sudden, lots of bad things start to
You think? Yeah.
prosperity man, and he's like, where is the king? Where is the parliament? And so this is why, with that in mind, and then you read all of this, but it all started with this, the 1720s version of the federal.
It happened at Hyde Island and
no, but
just
you read that, and it's like it ceases to be funny, and it comes back to you have been warned and forewarned, and then the most powerful word in Scripture, nevertheless. You have been warned and forewarned. Nevertheless, thou mayest choose for thyself, for I have given it unto thee. Right?
yeah.
Warned and forewarned. We could read this. We could teach this to our kids. But what the tyrants know for certain is that about 99% of people, even if they're sitting here and they're listening to this and they're nodding like, yeah, this is all true, they're still going to take their kids to the indoctrination camp on Monday.
That's right.
Period. And the tyrants know that. Why? People think, we're going to get to them if we keep shaking our fist on Facebook and if we put memes that make fun. They want you to do that because they know it's kind of like how porn gives you false testosterone. They know that acting up like this gives you a false sense of actually doing something. So they want you to complain. They want you to make a deal on social. They want you to do that because it satisfies something in you, but only temporarily.
Yeah.
It gives you that boost, that quick boost of, I'm sticking it to the man. But if you really wanted to stick it to the man, and you have children, the first thing you do is refuse to send them to the indoctrination camp. But the tyrant knows you're not going to do that.
It's way too easy not to.
You say indoctrination as like a metaphorical term, but realistically, if you go back to the board of directors on education, it's funded by John Rockefeller himself. So, you say that as a metaphor, but it's literal.
No, I don't mean metaphorically.
I took it as a metaphor, sorry.
Yeah.
In that, so I just wanted to point out, so your listeners can actually research that themselves and find that for themselves.
Yeah. It's we've had a couple of conversations about that, but you're right. It's absolutely an indoctrination camp set up to have your children be slaves to the state and the corporation that they're going to work for. So they could be little soldiers and little little pumping out money machines for the people in power.
Well, if you study the origin of it, the first federal Department of Education was started by Abraham Lincoln. And why? Because people in the North did not support a war of aggression against the South. And you can understand the feeling by reading the first few paragraphs of Lincoln's first inaugural, when he correctly explains the constitutional authority he had over the southern states, which is none. Right?
Yeah.
If they do wrong. Even if my neighbor does things that I believe morally wrong, I don't have the authority to stop him.
Right.
I can talk to him and encourage him not to. I can withdraw from him.
Right.
Cut off communication, but I can't go over there and at the point of a gun force him to do what I think is right. No, and again, but if we bring it down to a understandable, daily life level, everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. But if you put it into a government, people are like, Lincoln freed the slaves. Okay, he didn't. But the thing about Lincoln, remember the Department of Education? It was begun to what? To make sure that children were being brought up to accept war that was unjust. And it's perpetually done that.
Just basically to rewrite history.
Basically just created by Rockefeller and by so many others who contributed to John Dewey.
Yeah.
Right, Horace Mann. These people that created this system adopted it from Prussia, where it was designed to create citizens prepared to be soldiers. And that's what it always has since the 1860s when Lincoln, now yes, it ended quickly because Lincoln instituted the draft and other such things. And suspended habeas corpus, and so he didn't really need that, so he closed it down. But it has always existed. It restarted in earnest right around World War I.
Right.
Exactly the same time as the income tax and the Federal Reserve. Right, and then again, it's always the education is always associated with indoctrinating young people to accept tyranny and to conflict. That's why Tyranny for Dummies. Chapter 1 is get control of the education. Second is disarm the people.
Mm-hmm.
Third chapter, because you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you're done then. Yeah.
Right? Because if you teach people that slavery is freedom, we've always been at war with Eurasia.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
You can teach them that slavery is freedom, you're being educated. If you can teach them these things, and then you can disarm them, nothing stands in your way. But now, mind you, this was all written out in a list, written, 2,700 years ago by Aristotle. In Book 5 and Book 6 of his book, Politics, he lists all these things. But again, no one is going to take... You realize these things would have been taught to people that Cato's letters would have been taught to people that we would consider today in third grade.
That is remarkable how far we've fallen.
Yeah, but the point is, they have control of the education, so what are you going to do about it?
Right.
The only one thing, because every time I hear someone say, defund the schools, you can defund the schools right now, man. Take your kid out of it.
Yep. That's right.
You just defunded, if you take your kid out of an Arizona public or charter school, you just defunded that school of $8,000 a year.
That's right.
There you go, sorted. You defunded the school.
And so I have no say in the school board. Why do you care?
Why do you want to say?
Yeah. Let them do what they want to do. Let them teach what they want to teach, and those people that want take their kids there. And
Are you afraid that the people who are, let's say, graduating in 2023, are you scared of these people being geniuses and being clever enough to overcome the rest of us who have been taught truth? Dude, think of Gideon.
yeah,
Think of Gideon in his battle in the Bible.
that's so good.
When
Yeah.
Jehovah keeps saying, no, 30,000 is too many. If you beat them with 30,000, you're going to think it's because you were strong. So send someone away. Okay, how about now? No, you're still going to think it's to the point where he reduced it down to 300.
Right.
And they're like, we will never win with 300. Right, but you plus me will win.
That's right.
And with 300 soldiers, you're never going to think it was you that did it. You are going to know for a fact that I fought your battle for you. So who cares that you don't have a say in the school?
Right.
Let Washington do it. You're not going to reclaim it, guys. You are wasting your breath, your money, your youth, your time, talent, and treasure. You are wasting it if you're aiming at reforming what will not be reformed.
Right.
Like he said, right? They will not reform themselves. They will not punish themselves. Quit asking the federal courts to clamp down on one of its sister branches. Stop being stupid.
Yeah.
Pivot your view away from Washington, away from government at all. Pivot your view inside the walls of your home and build that as a beacon of liberty where you will raise these kids that are hid and unregarded.
That's right. You know,
Rely on that. Rely on the Lord to prosper his causes.
that's right. Associate yourself with like-minded people and rely on the Lord. Like, that's it.
This is where we got the, letter 69. I think the way it came up was talking about the neighbors.
Right.
Because he goes on and he says, if you want me to read,
Go ahead.
and sort of the call to actions. Now, therefore, my best friends, is the time to help yourselves. Now act honestly and boldly for liberty, or forget the glorious and charming sound. Now that in our class was, in one of the founders' classes, that became, we always adopted a motto from some of the stuff we were reading, and that was one of them. Now therefore, my best friends, is the time to help yourselves. Act honestly and boldly for liberty, or forget the glorious and charming sound. That's the act. And so what do? He said,
That's what I love is,
he says, throw your eyes about your several countries. Now, what is he talking about? Is he talking about countries other than England? No. Countries within England. Right? Country meant a society of like-minded people. There are many countries in England.
mm-hmm.
There are many countries in the United States. So he says, throw your eye. Don't look at London. Forget London. It's gone. Right? London, what is it? London is drowning, I live by the river. Right? London is gone. In the immortal words of Morrissey, London is dead. Don't look to London, he says. Throw your eyes about your several countries.
That's right.
Your little neighborhood. And he says, and what does he say? Choose your patrons, choose your protectors, choose your neighbors and your known friends. That's your first step. Mm-hmm. Right? Choose your neighbors, he says. Did you choose your neighbors?
No.
Did you? No. Did I? No.
Yeah, it.
So maybe start thinking that these things are real and not just the fertile for the selection of clever quotations. Maybe think this is real, historically sound counsel for people that want to be free. So he says, act for yourselves. Throw your eyes about your several countries. Look around. Choose your patrons. Choose your protectors. Choose your neighbors and your known friends. I'm telling you, the idea of dividing up into tribes of your friends, your family. And
We need to do a podcast on that, my friend.
I'm just saying, counsel given to do that very thing. There
Yeah.
happened a time when the people looked around, they saw that a conspiracy had destroyed their Republican government,
Yep.
and they decided to splinter into tribes of kindred, family, friends.
That's right. And by the way,
And that's
And
throwing your eyes about your several.
and it doesn't mean like they didn't interact with each other.
No, in fact, it says they didn't.
Right.
They just made an accord. They made an agreement. We're not going to go to war. I don't like you. I don't like the way you live. I don't like the principles you espouse. And you don't like mine. So let's remain separate, but let's make an agreement. You don't go to war with me. I don't want to go to war with you. I don't steal from you. You don't steal from me. I don't kill your people. You don't kill my people. But we can still trade if we want to.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like,
But that's so utopian.
I mean, I would literally, if it were asked of me this, if God asked me this of me, I would die to protect the right of two gay dudes who are married to protect their marijuana crop with an M16. I don't want to live around gay married dudes. And they don't want to live around me.
Right. But that's not
Smoke weed, but they don't want me telling them they can't.
right.
Right? I don't want to. I'm going to do what he says. I'm going to throw my eyes around my country. And I'm going to choose patrons, protectors, neighbors, and known friends. And make that my society, my country. And say, I don't want anything to do with the other countries as far as their laws. We want to make our own laws, but we're not going to try to exert any sort of influence over your laws. That ship has sailed. We tried that one time when we had a Republican government, and it worked until the conspiracy gained control of the government to shield their perversions and their murders. Like, we know that life. We're living that life.
Right. That's
Right? So what is it left to us to do? Throw your eyes about your several countries and do these things. Choose, I mean, what a thing to choose your neighbors. Thomas Gordon, now he didn't write this, Trenchard wrote this, but Thomas Gordon wrote a book. I swear if I could, I have retyped it. I want to get it out to people. But he wrote a book called 3 Political Letters to a Noble Lord on liberty and the Constitution. Now, not the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of England.
right.
He wrote this at the end, right near the end of Cato's letters, Thomas Gordon. And in there, he goes through these things about what it takes to be free and to maintain that liberty. One of the things he says is, and we even have an echo of it in the Second Amendment. Everybody focuses on keep and bear arms. No one focuses on why. Because a militia is necessary to maintain a free state. You will never find in all the writings of our founders any time that keeping and bearing arms is not mentioned in context, in concert with the militia. And that's a word that dare not speak its name even among conservatives today.
Right.
And that's fine. You're not going to be my neighbor. But Thomas Gordon, in one of his letters, says, you have to, and this is what people don't get. He's quoting Livy, who wrote The History of Rome. Gordon says, as Livy taught us, Livy hasn't taught us anything in 100 years, because you're not allowed to read that in school.
Yeah.
So he says, as Livy taught us, the only way to keep our country, and not giant empire, but the only way to keep our country free is to have a militia. Well, actually, I can pull up the exact quote because it's so powerful.
Okay. I'm loving this. Are you digging this, Joseph?
I can listen all day to your voice.
He says, each man, says Livy, chose his relation and his neighbor for his companion in war. They made a solemn oath to be true to each other and resolved to conquer or to die together. The confederacy consisting of relations and friends whose virtue, valor, and abilities were known to each other, and raised and animated their courage and inspired them with such sentiments as had like to been proved fatal to the Roman power. Such a combination makes the interest of one the interest of all. Their motives and their ends are all the same. Their counsels are regularly directed, so well-regulated. Counsels are regularly directed, and their conduct from thence is so uniform that no other ambition, no other confederacy could ever disturb them. So when he says, choose your neighbors, choose your friends, choose to live around these people, because it is only by having these relations and friends as your companions in war that power is so inspiring and so animating. This confederacy of relations and friends would prove fatal to even the Roman power.
And I mean, that is so powerful because, well, I kind of just want to let that hang a little bit, but the idea that your interests are so aligned with somebody else. I'm reminded of someone who said that once we make our covenants with God, the next important thing for us to do is to make covenants with our friends and our neighbors. And I don't think I quite understood that until hearing this better, because it is a covenant of love and a covenant of war, a covenant of protection, and it only happens when your interests are aligned together, and not in a weird communist sense of like aligned, like our stuff is one and all of that, but it's more aligned like my interests are your interests because number one, I love you as my neighbor, and number two, like the next person, as a selfish point of view, they get you, they're getting me. So it's better for us to go stand. And if you want to join in too, now we got 3. And now I just created a Charlie Brown song. Sorry, that's a really bad inside joke.
Right over my head.
Sorry. Charlie Brown the musical. There's a song about one becomes 2, it becomes 3 and more, and then more, and then sorry.
Sing more of it, Mike.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, thing about Charlie Brown musical. Well, and it goes on. It just makes not so foolish a bar. Who are you going to trust? Don't trust any man who has dipped his hands into public spoils. Make not so foolish a bargain as for a little loose money to give up desperately all that you have, your liberty, your estate, your family. Do you know what the education system in America has done to families?
Oh, just look around.
Boy.
Look around. And
all of these things we have given up all of these things for a little loose money. It is for your sakes, you think, that these jobbers of stocks and of honesty and of their country, you think it's for you that they come to caress you, flatter you, and bow down to you?
Nope.
Do you or can you believe that they come to impair their fortunes to increase yours? Do you think that anybody running for office pays millions of dollars to get in that office so that he can do the best he can for you?
Baloney. Yeah, BS.
BS is right. He does that to enrich himself. If you don't believe it, look up the net worth of these people when they enter office and when they leave. And guess what? Tyrant's going to tyrant. Thief is going to thief. Pervert is going to pervert. You are not going to take this out of the... So he says, what? Whose fault is it? Yours. And he says, you don't have any right or pretense to reprove them for doing what they've always done.
I love that so much. Yeah. Don't yell at the duck for crapping on your car, because that's what ducks do.
Right. You wouldn't park your car under a tree and then get pissed that there's bird crap on it.
Right.
Because any sane person would say, is that the bird's fault or your fault, maybe?
Right. Yeah. So either...
Again, it goes back to driving on the flat tire.
Yep.
And you have no right or pretense to reprove that person who does what he does. And he says, do you think they're going to increase your wealth? No, they're coming to increase their own. Or think you not that they will get their penny's worth out of you? Depend on it, they will.
They will.
And listen to this, man. This is when Trencher's just hitting his stride, man. For every bucket of water thrown into your well, they will pump out tons.
Okay, and all I have to say to that is the COVID money.
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
Everybody right now, I got my tax return.
Right.
You slavish imbecile.
Absolutely, 100%. Like...
They threw a bucket into your well, but all year they've been taking out way more. Thimble in your bank account for the riverful they've taken out.
Yep.
But
we've allowed it.
Say we haven't been warned.
Right.
I mean, what did Samuel say? Talk about
oh my gosh.
Israel.
Yep.
Israel had a king. That must mean it's the right thing.
Yeah. No.
Have you read the Bible?
Right. No, he's going to steal your women, to send your men to war, and then steal your money to build themselves castles. And that's exactly what he did. What they did.
But again, can you be warned? Yes. Are there ways to learn these things? Teach them to your children? Yes. Are you going to do it? No. And therefore, you have no right or pretense to reprove what's going on.
And this is why the sins of the fathers last 3-4 generations.
Right. And why he, the tyrant, will find no difficulty selling those who have before sold themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen and amen to that. That's exactly what you have no leg to stand on. Once you've shown yourself to be the whore, we're just now, quibbling over the price.
Consider, my dear friends and countrymen, what I have said, and think what you are doing, while you are raising hue and cry after men who will betray you, while you are sending afar for courtiers, for directors of bubbles, for company men, and for public pickpockets to represent you, while you are giving up, perhaps forever, to the mercy of bloodsuckers, your honest industry, the just profits of your trade, and for what? For a poor, momentary share of their infamous plunder, and that thereby bringing a canker upon your subsistence and the just resentment of heaven upon your endeavors.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
first of 23 installments requested by Dr. Levitt. We're trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization down.